Hello guys, welcome to the first class in the tutorial series on guesstimations. So in this class we'll be talking about what the guesstimations are, why do we need these, and how to solve such problems. So guesstimation basically consists of two words, guess and estimate. So it requires some amount of prior knowledge and after that some reasonable calculation to quantify your final KPI or the metric which you want to estimate, right? So the guesstimation problems are generally asked like this. So let's say you want to estimate the size of milk consumers in a particular city or a country. You want to estimate the number of people using the public transport on a daily basis. So those are few examples of the guesstimation problems. So as I told, it consists of some prior knowledge and some reasonable calculation. So you can assign the weight like 20% of prior knowledge is required to solve the guesstimates, and 80% effort is required for the reasonable calculations. So these are few examples of the guesstimation problem. So let's say estimate the number of cigarette sales in India per year, or estimate the number of office chairs in Bangalore, or estimate the number of flights in air currently. So let's look at a simple problem statement. So the problem statement says to estimate the number of Indians who consume tea, right? So let's see from a layman's perspective. So if someone who is not particularly involved in the field of stats or data analysis, right? So he would think, okay, so I like tea, let's say everyone else is also like very fond of tea, and in my locality I see so many tea shops, right? And considering the population of 1.3 billion people, I think 500 million is a good estimate, right? So this is one way of solving the problem, but the issue comes while supporting this 500 million, which is your final answer. So in that case comes the analyst's perspective. So an analyst will think in terms of the prior knowledge and the reasonable calculation. So he'll first note down what all things he know. So he knows the population of India, which is 1.3 billion. He knows the age distribution. So 30% are the minors, 60% belongs to 50 to 60 years of the age, and 10% belongs to 61 plus. And he also knows the distribution of urban and rural populations, which is 40 and 60%. So using this prior calculation, prior knowledge, he will do some reasonable calculations on top of it. So he'll have few assumptions. So too young and too old people are out of consideration for this problem. So the assumption is people below 14 years or 61 plus won't consume tea. So the base reduces to 60% of 1.3 billion, which amounts to 780 million, and then he breaks down that 780 million to 470 million and 310 by urban versus rural population distribution, right? After that, he considers another assumption that due to more options and lifestyle choices in the urban region, the percentage of tea drinking people will be comparatively less. So he has considered the consumption to be around 60% in rural area, whereas 40% in the urban area, due to availability of let's say some other drinking beverages, juices or coffee, something like that. So using these assumptions and these calculations, he comes up to a number of 400 million. Now let's take a step back and look at the 500 million which a layman has predicted and 400 million which an analyst has estimated. So although you can see that the two numbers are in ballpark, but an analyst is able to support this calculation based on his prior knowledge and the calculation which he did, whereas the layman's 500 million is just based on like purely on assumptions. Now next comes the second point, which is why we need guesstimates. So the major use, or I would say it is a criteria to select the candidates for analyst jobs in the interviews. So it is a part of their questionnaire. Another reason being that it comes very handy to get a scope or the impact of any problem. So let's say you want to you are launching a new app and you want to estimate your market size. So using the guesstimations, you can estimate a very high level market size of your app, which will in turn give you an idea of the total sales which you can have out of it. Another reason being it gives a panelist, so in terms of the interviews, it gives panelists a peek in your problem solving and your thinking abilities. It tells them the way you think. Are you capable of solving analytical problems or not? It also helps to improve the mental calculation, because in the guesstimations, because of time constraint, you have to make the calculations very quick, for which you do most of the calculation in your mind, so which basically improves your simple calculations like additions, multiplications, like that. And last but not the least, that Google cannot answer all the questions, right? Because when you move from textbooks or use cases to real life problems, right, the real business corporate problems, so those are not that much well defined. So in that case, guesstimations come pretty handy to support your numbers. Basically, you have a logical backing for the numbers which you provide. Now let's see how to solve such problems. So the golden rule is, if you are preparing guesstimates for your interviews or for your next job switch, to focus on the approach more and less on the accuracy of your results, because anyone who is analyzing your analytical capabilities will see your approach rather than the final outcome which you are getting. So let's say even if you get 500 million in the sample problem which we saw in the first slide, if you have a logical backing for it, you have some valid reasons to back that 500 million, that is totally acceptable, because guesstimates are not aimed to give the accurate result, the to the point result, but it is more inclined towards your calculation or your approach. What reasons do you provide to back your numbers? So to solve the problem, I would suggest just break the problem. So if so the problem can be of two types. It can be either consumption based or it can be production based. So by consumption based, I mean, let's say how much cigarettes are consumed in a year, or the cakes in a city, so which is related to general population, general consumption habits of the population, right? So for such problems, you should have age distributions, you can use income distributions, you can use urban rural distributions. These distributions break down your problem into smaller sets, and it is easy to calculate and easy to estimate it in parts, right? And if it is production based, so let's say the number of cars manufactured in India in a year, right? So for such kind of problems you can use the business distribution. So let's say small, medium and large size businesses distribution in your country, or you can also use male to female ratio, etc. So you can go through or have as much distributions as you want, but for simplicity or in general use cases we use these distributions more often. Then second step includes your calculation part. So you have to put a reasonable number or percentage to each segment. So let's say you know that income distribution is going to help you solve the problem, but you do not know what the exact income distribution is. So put some reasonable number there. It is not like you can put 50-50 or 70-30% like that. You should have some backing for those percentages, because whoever is looking at those numbers, if those are very much offset, they are going to ask you for the reason for the percentages which you have considered, right? So have some reasonable numbers for each segment, and put those numbers based on your prior knowledge, and also use some sort of common sense to put those numbers. Then third point says to have the correct calculations. So even if you are rounding off the numbers, it is totally fine to make 550 million as 500 million and do the calculations. It is totally fine, but make sure you do correct calculations. If you are not very much comfortable with multiplications and divisions in mind, then use paper and pen, but do the calculations correctly. And the last point is related to your end result. Just observe the result. In many cases you might come up with a result which is very much offset. So it is totally fine to have offset number as well as per your calculation, but make sure you can explain what might went wrong in your approach. So there can be cases like you have considered some non-realistic income distribution or urban rural distribution, right? So it is totally fine to have it, but you should know what went wrong in your calculation. And again, it is not about the end result, but about the approach which you use. And yeah, one more golden rule is to have few numbers in hand in your mind, like the population of your country or your state, what is the gender, age, income distributions, total area of your region. You can find these over the internet, but have these rough numbers in your mind whenever you are preparing for some interviews or something, because these comes very handy. So yeah, I think this concludes our first class on the guesstimations. Let me know your thoughts on this, and hope this tutorial will help you prepare more, like in a more efficient way for your interviews or your jobs. Thanks for watching.